was asking for...
Before you start, Mr. Proposis,
Yes,
let me
sir.
just say, I found the staff memo on this to be extremely comprehensive. I thought it was very well done, and I want to congratulate all the people who worked on that. Also appreciated the staff following the new protocol of sign-offs from the relevant parties. So I don't want to cut off anything you have to say, but I do want to say that my colleagues, I'm sure, have read the memo, so if you can hit the highlights and then open it up to questions. Probably.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm very happy to cut to the chase, if you will, Mr. Chair. Certainly not wanting to have any negative effect on your perception of the item. Staff is asking board approval to execute the agreement regarding commitments toward the Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project, the 7-party MOU, and approval to enter into a contract with the Peninsula Corridor Joint Powers Board to pay the authority's portion of the state's both $600 million in Prop 1A funds and an additional potential $113 million in funding committed to the Caltrain electrification project. And finally, as you've heard from Mr. Patterson and others, to fund the agreement with the City of San Mateo for the grade separation project at 25th Street. In fact, it's a grade separation project that will clear 3 grade crossings, 25th, 28th, and 31st Streets, improving access and operation for the system, accommodating future passing tracks in that location. In fact, a very vital section of the Peninsula Corridor for future blended service. And importantly, as Mr. Patterson points out, it establishes a terrific relationship with the local community who both wants us there and is very much supportive of our efforts toward grade separating the program. As you pointed out, Mr. Chair, I'd also like to acknowledge Tom Fallenz, Jim Andrew, and Boris Lipkin, who contributed to developing this project, this presentation rather. Caltrain Executive Director Jim Hartnett, Caltrain Council David Miller and Joan Kassman, San Mateo City Manager Larry Patterson, and their Public Works Director Brad Underwood, who were all instrumental in negotiating this agreement and moving the item forward. I'm happy to answer any questions and move it forward, given the board's understanding of the item.
Okay, Mr. Morales wanted to make a comment.
Mr. Chairman, just real quickly, I think that this is a very important step forward in implementing the statewide program envisioned and approved by this board. We'll hear later today about the ongoing construction in the Central Valley. We're also advancing with our partners key projects in Southern California, and now this program, which electrification has tremendous benefits for the region in the peninsula in terms of mobility, the doubling of capacity ultimately on the system, GHG reductions there, and safety improvements, particularly with the San Mateo piece. And again, it really underscores we are in fact moving forward with the statewide rail modernization program and following through on the commitments made by the board and by the legislature to implement these programs. And I would just add one other thanks to Steve Heminger at the MTC, who has played a very important role in coordinating the regional approach on all of this. And this is definitely a partnership with the region, with Caltrain, with all of the other agencies there.
Thank you, Mr. Morales. I was at one point going to also add to the list of people to thank with Mr. Heminger on there, and also I think want to recognize the leadership of State Transportation Secretary Brian Kelly and his team, Brian Annis and Chad Edison, everybody working together with the Peninsula JPB folks. You know, when you have partnerships, there are a lot of tough issues, and the people who are committed work through those. So thank you, Mr. Morales, for those comments. With that, let's turn to questions. First up would be Ms. Pasquette. And Mr. Hartnett, if you could be prepared to answer any questions.
I think I may have had my question answered. Happy to ask it. I would move staff recommendation on this item. My question was, in the board materials, there were many valuable pieces of information, as you noted, Chair Richards. There's a reference to the greenhouse gas emission reductions because of diesel conversion to electrification, and so my question was around the total emission reductions that we will realize through this conversion. And Mr. Hartnett, if you'd like to answer that, feel free. I think it's important to underscore that because of many objectives we have with our project, this is one of the more important. I think I gave you enough time to get the right answer.
I actually don't have the specific figure in mind. I know it's a ton. We have it in all our materials, and I'll be happy to get it to you. It's a great feature of our program. You know, we talk a lot about what it does in terms of the capacity and efficiency, but what it really does for the entire community is change the nature of the environment in which our over 19 million riders ride through each year. We already, with what we do, take over 430 million road miles off the road each year at our current capacity. But we're doing that with a diesel fleet. And to do that with an electric fleet is going to be such a game changer that it is going to have tremendous benefits, not just for our region, but you know how the ripple effect of all of that. So we're really proud of what we're going to be able to accomplish there.
And maybe this is getting ahead a little bit, but I do want our executive director to answer it because I think he does have the answer. That's how good he is.
I know it's in the materials. It's just I lost it on the drive up this morning as I was coming.
And maybe as you answer that, you can go back to Mr. Guerrero's question earlier regarding the environmental justice issue, because I think that also deserves an answer.
Sure. On the GHG reductions, the reductions initially are 80,000 tons in the CO2 equivalents a year, then growing to about 180,000 as the system gets fully implemented. So it's a significant contribution for the region.
That comports with the figures we have, yes.
On Mr. Guerrero's points, I'll ask Tom Philens or is Jim going to respond? There were two issues, I think, one on the environmental justice and then on the DBE program.
So, you know, I'm not totally sure partly of what he was referring to. We are doing another disparity study, which we regularly do, and so that's just an ongoing feature of what we do, both for our Caltrain and for our Samtrans organization.
I think he's referring, I'm going to guess.
I understand that, but the study that we're doing now is a disparity study.
No, so. But I think he's referring to Title VI. Federally funded programs need to comply with Title VI, which involves environmental justice analysis.
I understand that, but he talked about having just a recent environmental justice study, and what I'm saying is we are doing is, yes, we're doing a disparity study.
Well, Mr. Hartnett's correct. There were two issues raised. One were the goals, which relate back to the disparity study, and the other is the environmental justice aspect of it, which relates to a second category.
Right. So, I was thinking that he was mistaken in terms of what we were just most recently doing, because we're most recently doing is a disparity study. I will get back to him on any other questions that he has. But as to the goals, we have a separate program of goals that is largely driven for Caltrain by the federal requirements, because most of our funds come from the federal sources.
I'm going to ask you to, well, I know you're trying to be helpful.
Please pardon the interruption. Your conference contains less than 3 participants at this time. If you would like to continue, press *1 now, or the conference will be terminated.
Let's hold on 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So the goals that we set are prescribed by our federal program, because that is largely where we get our funds. And so we do have the federal requirements that we comply with in terms of our goal setting. And so that's what we have done, and we look at that each year. But we do have to comply with the federal requirements, and that's what we do.
And may I interrupt and add that because this is a new program and a new project, the disparity studies don't have a long history, and so because it is relatively new and we're charting a new path with our federal oversight agency, that it's important to do it the right way and the way that this state would expect it to be done to reflect our population. But I think it's important to explain that because it's somewhat complicated, and it relates back to, in part, the fact that this is blazing a bit of a new trail for us.
And we just recently had a report to our board on the disparity study as well. So we'll make sure that you have all the updated information that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me turn now to our remote site in San Diego. Director Shank, or do you have a question for Mr. Kaposis?
I don't have a question. Well, I don't have a question, just a comment. As most of the board knows, maybe the new members don't, that I was opposed to this blended issue from the beginning. I didn't believe and don't believe that the law allows for it, but I'm nothing if not a student of practical and political reality, and I was on the losing side of that issue, and so rather than cast a symbolic no vote, consistent with my prior position, I will be inconsistent, and because this train has left the station, as they say, I will be supportive of the staff recommendation.
Thank you, Ms. Shank. Questions from my colleagues here in Sacramento? Mr. Curtin.
I'm share with Jeff Morales the enthusiasm for this development. It's been a while coming. I think it's a great thing. It actually begins to make it look like we're going to have a system that goes statewide here. But I do want to ask about the funding, the increase in the funding a little bit, because it seems like a pretty large increase, and I'm wondering if the scope of the work has expanded to justify some of that, or just the original analysis were not thorough enough, or just didn't have their grip on the cost. Because I'm glad to see our percentage of, we're sort of leveraging more money, but the cost has gone up dramatically. So could you give us a little sense of what happened there?
Thank you, Director Curtin. It really is a byproduct of a more detailed evaluation of the cost of electrification in the Peninsula Corridor. The original estimates that that Caltrain had completed on the project and the elements, all the infrastructure components of electrification established the original 1.4 plus budget for the project. The 2016 reevaluation took a closer look at each of those components. Obviously, there's some cost escalation in the time that it's taken to move the program forward and secure all the funding for it. It's important to note, as the memo points out, that all of the other funding partners have taken action to commit their additional funds to this, and the proportional share for the authority is the $113 million. But it really is largely based on the reevaluation of the infrastructure components to deliver electrification.
Okay, because there always seems to be a lag time, so that doesn't really seem to be a valid, the escalation of the cost, because it took us so long to get from here to there. We all know it's going to take a couple of years, so that should have been sort of written into the process. But I have to admit, I'm a little concerned that it wasn't evaluated more thoroughly for an understanding of the cost, because every time we do this, we open ourselves up to well, gee, the costs are going up.
I should also note that the Caltrain team, the Joint Powers team, has gone through a very exhaustive best and final offer process with the design builders. So they worked very hard to reduce the overall cost of the design build project itself.
And I would just add, we've built provisions into our agreement for continued value engineering and for cost savings then to be shared among the parties.
Well, since it's a design build, I'm assuming.
Right.
Hopefully we've kind of evolved in our knowledge of how to operate under design build, and we will extract as much of the benefit of that, economically speaking, as opposed to constantly sort of picking and changing. This is an important consideration.
And I'd just like to just have a little bit of pronoun control here, because when you say we, this program is going to be managed and accomplished by the Peninsula Joint Powers Board and the Caltrain team. We're a funding partner. We are a responsible agency under CEQA, but just so we're all clear, this is not one where we or our team are going to be, we don't have any direct involvement with the contract or the contractor. Our interest, I think it's important to note this, is that as part of the agreement, if the board adopts it, what we get, which is really critical for us, is we get essentially the right of use of this corridor, the entry into the corridor, for our purposes for potential blended service. That's really the key here. So the quid pro quo, if you will, and I'm looking at our general counsel who will correct me if I'm wrong, is that by virtue of the direction of the California legislature, that we construct this project within the existing corridor to the greatest extent possible, and that we explore the use of blended service on that corridor consistent with the objectives and purposes of the Bond Act. That this vote today would be that we would provide a funding contribution in return for which we would have the rights to operate in that corridor. And in fact, the Peninsula JPB would even transfer access rights that they might get from private rail operators in the corridor now to us, so that we would have those as well. So stated plainly, we're sharing in the cost of developing a corridor that could benefit Caltrain and provide the corridor for high-speed rail. This is our funding contribution, which, by the way, is billions and billions and billions of dollars below what it would cost us to build a separate standalone set of tracks. So, and I'll just comment on the cost growth. All of us are disappointed to see cost growth in this, but I think it's probably less of a surprise to see it when you're talking about building in an urban, a highly dense, highly built up urban corridor where you have everything from commercial interest to environmental justice interest, and you have an operating railroad at the same time. This is one of the things that makes the electrification of Amtrak in the Northeast Corridor so expensive. It's an ongoing operating action there. And I would say that in the meetings that we've had with Jim Hartnett and his team, some of the issues that were driving some of the costs, where they were trying to balance minimizing disruption to their citizens by narrowing the construction window, we pushed pretty hard on those issues to get them to be as accommodating as possible to the construction schedule. And again, they still have a responsibility to protect their riders, but I think that there have been a number of efforts. Yes, it's true the cost, their estimates of cost have grown, but they've also been able to pull back on a lot of that cost growth by working using design-build concepts to get this underway. But it really is a partnership where, you know, for the part coming into the urban area, we can use this corridor. That's been demonstrated, and it could save us ultimately a lot of money, and also the ability to just build. Trying to get a standalone set of tracks permitted through that part of California was going to be enormously difficult, which is one of the reasons the legislature said we want you to look at using the existing corridor.
Well, you may remember I'm a pretty big fan of the blended sections in the urban areas, and I didn't want my comments to reflect negatively on that. I always get a little bit nervous when I see an expansion of the costs, but I think it's absolutely critical, fundamental portion of the system. Nobody was ever going to blow through the peninsula at 220 miles an hour. You wouldn't be able to stop, for crying out loud, by the time you got to San Jose. So this is a very critical development. It's really very good news. I'm glad to see it's underway, and I certainly support the proposal. I just want to, and you know, Dan, thank you for straightening out, because it wasn't clear on me that we're not actually overseeing this project. We're just participating in it. But since we're actually participating with money, we have a little bit to say. So I just want to make sure we keep
We
that
have a
in
lot to
mind.
say. Right. Okay, no, thanks. Mr. Rossi? Okay, microphone, please.
I may have missed this, so clarify this for me. We're a funding partner. What are we committed to as a funding partner?
Investing in the electrification
No, I
of the
understand
corridor.
that. As a funding partner, in a financial sense,
Yes.
we're committed to fund this commitment. Are we committed to fund overrides?
Overruns?
No.
No.
No, we are not. We are, in fact, Mr. Falens and Mr. Andrew have done a great job in the agreement, I believe, of ensuring that the commitment that we identify and that the board approves today is our line in the sand, if you will, that we have done our due diligence both with the Caltrain team and they have with their contractor to ensure that we are working toward the costs that we've identified here. And our
right,
commitment
that's-
is as it's described here.
So our commitment is for this, whatever this amount is,
Yes,
X.
sir.
We move down the road in construction, and with all due respect, Jim, I'm not suggesting this is the case, I'm just putting up a straw dog. There are increased costs. It's not managed well, because we're not managing anything. We don't have any oversight. We have no veto power.
Well, I'd actually amend that slightly. There is an oversight group that is represented by each of the funding partners, so
we have
we'll
ve-
be engaged in the
Do we have
conversation.
veto power?
We certainly have directive power,
I didn't ask that. Do we have veto power?
direct veto power. I believe we do. I think that
Lance,
working...
do we have veto power?
Come to the microphone.
No, we don't have veto power. We're one of the funding partners, and there is a...
So, look, I'm just trying to understand potential risk here, because as I read this, we don't really discuss that. We need this segment to be built. We're committed to X as a funding partner, as Ben said. We move down the road, with all due respect to Mr. Hartnett there, it's not managed well. There are cost overruns. And we don't have any say in that. We got a problem.
Can I just clarify your question, Mr. Rossi? When you say, and believe me, I understand your concern and I support it, but I just want to make sure we're precise. When you say we don't have any veto power, I mean, the question is, we can't be compelled under this agreement to provide more money.
I got that. That's not the question.
So I'm not sure,
The question is whether or not we can be compelled. We're not going to walk away from this project if it starts to have problems, because we need to complete it. So it's not a matter of being compelled by the document, it's being compelled by the practicalities of building the project. And I'm just trying to understand, knowing that is the case, how much control we have in trying to be sure that the appropriate oversight is in place to ensure that we don't end up with that problem.
that's the precision I wanted the question to stay.
So let me, a few things. One, within the budget, the new budget, which we are contributing to, there is contingency established in the budget to help address potential issues in construction. There has been
On that, and I'm just going to, as you give me this,
Sure.
okay? So have we run our risk assessment of those contingencies?
No, not in the detail that we would ours.
Okay.
Jeff,
But
I
that's-
just wanted to clarify, is the contingency you're talking about, the contingency in the project that's held by Mr. Hartnett's organizations, or what contingency are you talking about?
Yes, that's in the total budget managed by Caltrain, and
Okay.
it's actually required by the FTA.
Okay.
And so that
Great.
level has been negotiated with the FTA.
Okay.
As
Do
part
we
of their
know what the number
requirements.
is, as we stand here today, Ben? Do we know what the contingency number is?
It's 20%, I believe, is where, and Mr. Hartnett can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 20%, and that was the FTA directive.
Okay,
And that's tied to the federal grant
Yeah.
as a requirement.
That's correct.
We do have processes, one place we do have a veto, In the agreement that you're being asked to consider, the initial step is to issue a limited notice to proceed upon contract execution for design work and for some limited advanced material acquisition. That's to, again, further define the scope, identify if any issues come up, but also...
Not unlike what we did.
Sorry?
Not unlike what we did.
Right, exactly.
Right.
Very much like this board did. The other thing it does is gets us to the point the federal government is expected to finalize its commitment to the project sometime around the end of the year or early next year. And so we wanted to make sure that before the project proceeded to full notice to proceed, that was secured. And so, there is provision in here that if there is a delay in the federal, they cannot issue the full notice without our concurrence. Okay. So that's a veto on that, which was very specifically to control that risk, but everyone agreed that was the right thing to do. And then third, there is built into the process, as was mentioned, ongoing oversight of all the funding partners. That doesn't have veto authority per se, but it gets us into the regular progress of the project.
There's
Get to see
reporting
weekly
authority
reports.
to the funding partners, so we're well advised of what's going on in the project. If there's problems, we're going to be one of the first.
Right, exactly. And then finally, unless I can think of something else, but finally, the agreement is also very clear that there is no obligation on the part of any of the funding partners to cover any cost increase, and that should there be a cost increase, well, let me say, first, there is an affirmative obligation on the part of Caltrain with us working in oversight to contain the costs and for us to work jointly to try to even reduce them if at all possible. But that if there are cost increases, that has to, there's nothing in this that triggers any obligation on anyone's part to a specific amount or to any amount to cover that. So it would be a new separate discussion if that does occur.
So, look, number one, I support this, but I think that we need to do some homework in the authority. We need to set up a set of processes so that we truly do track this contract, so that we are not caught unawares, that we are good partners with my good friend Jim over there, so that we can opine in a rational, reasonable way as to whether or not the project's getting out of hand, because the fact that there is a limit on what we are committed to is not a limit that, other than in a legal sense, but in the pragmatic sense of building this project. Once we start down this road, we're in. So we need to be sure from our side that we have built the appropriate reporting mechanisms to understand exactly what's going on and to protect our interests. That isn't to suggest, Jim, that you don't have your own exercise, but as you well know, we have a fiduciary responsibility to be sure that we take care of this exercise. And there is too much of what Mr. Curtin talked about a minute ago, of, well, we've had an increase and it's because of the delays. And that's exactly, and that's not a criticism of you, Ben. We probably didn't structure our initial thought process as harshly as we should have. So be it. But going forward, we need to be very, very careful, because the fact that this commitment is for this amount of dollars is not very important. Once you start spending these dollars, we're not, right. We have got to be sure we're on top of this, and I don't wish to vote on this project in a positive manner without a commitment that we're going to get within the next couple of months. In the next board meeting, I want to have a probability analysis on a risk basis done on this funding, on this project.
You know, Mr. Rossi, I appreciate those comments, and what comes to mind is when I was just back with Mr. Morales and the team at the Federal Railroad Administration, which is in the position of being a funding partner of our project. I was surprised but pleased to learn that they ran their own parallel risk management process from their perspective, looking at our project. Now, there were times when there were a number of things that, maybe our assumptions were different or whatever, but it was...
But ours is better.
Well, and actually, I think ours were better. But I I just felt good that our funding partner was running their own independent assessment, and they worked with Mr. Tapping and so forth, because it just meant that there was another set of eyes.
Right,
Because
absolutely.
as good as we are, there's always something where somebody might have a different perspective and so forth. So I think what you're suggesting, thinking about that, and I'm hoping that our friends at Caltrain don't see any problem with this, is I think you've uncovered a very important point here, which is that as we go forward, we shouldn't just write the check, but we should be looking at this in the same way that we're looking at our project, which is constantly evaluating the risks so that we can, and I don't think anybody can question what you said. There's a legal reality and then there's a practical reality. Nobody wants to be sitting here facing a half-finished project, so we need early warning systems for that. And if we can...
And I would thank Mr. Morales in the negotiation. There's enough exercise here that we can do some important stuff. We just need to get it structured internally.
Yeah, Mr. Morales.
I did think of two other things. Actually, under the appropriation, condition of the appropriation in SB 1029 of the $600 million is a requirement for the development of a project management plan that then is submitted to the Department of Finance before the bond funds can be expended. So, and that will get into a lot of the particulars. And we have already, in fact, assigned an internal project manager to be our person directly overseeing. It's an expert from the Network Rail Group in the UK who is an expert in electrification projects. So I think we're putting all the pieces into place to do what we should be doing and what you're asking us to do, and we'll come back with a full report on as those pieces come together, and regularly update the board on where we are.
With those considerations, not part of the recommendation, but with those considerations as an overarching thought process, I'm happy to move this.
Okay. Well, Ms. Pasquette moved it, so if I can
I'm happy to
mark you down as a
second.
that'll
We
be
have
good.
two motions.
Vice Chair Richards, did you have any other questions or comments?
Well, you all have pretty much covered all of them, but just for everyone to understand, so the major portion of what we're doing here is actually, the funding is actually legislatively mandated, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and with regards to the San Mateo request, that's not legislatively mandated.
It is not. It's reflected in our business plan.
Right, I understand. And that was my next point. Everything that we're discussing here has been incorporated in the 2016 business plan. Without question, we all recognize the importance of the blended approach, which is the adopted approach that we've taken on since, I think, 2012. This is an important step in moving that forward in an area of California where we are planning on moving first. So it's not by any means early. I guess I think where I was going a few moments ago also was to ensure that we've got appropriate and timely reporting on what's going on, and that shouldn't be just this project. It would seem, Mr. Chair, it should be on any funding that we are providing to third-party agencies of resources that are coming through this organization. And so it shouldn't be something that's just being levied on Caltrain and the associated agencies, but all of what we're doing in Northern and Southern California, because it would seem to me we do have the obligation to ensure that the funding is being adequately managed and reported if there are problems. I think it would be also important for staff to have a familiar working knowledge of what happens if there are, what the plans are on behalf of Caltrain if there are overruns. What's going to keep the project on track? Because we simply cannot afford it not to make the point at which it's concluded, and I don't think we've got the resources to add to it, and we certainly don't have the obligation.
Well, to that point, Vice Chair Richards, we virtually have our team embedded with the Caltrain team. We meet with them on a virtually weekly basis. We have, as I mentioned, we will have oversight meetings related to the project itself, but we have ongoing discussions with their team, both about the electrification project and future blended service as our environmental review moves forward.
Okay. I would think that the additional information, Mike, ought to be directed to the Finance and Audit Committee and then on to the board. If that's-
We would incorporate into the
Okay.
existing format at FNA a report on this
Okay.
implementation of this
That
project.
would be great.
Yes.
And then John, wherever John is, can weigh in on how you assess the risk. Okay. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Any other comments?
Well, I don't know if this is practical or appropriate. Should we amend the resolution to include the reporting?
I was going to suggest that unless Mr. Rossi, I thought I heard Mr. Rossi say, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, that he didn't need to see an amendment in the resolution as long as we get a commitment from the staff that,
No, I don't want to change
yeah.
let's get this done. There's a commitment by the authorities board that we will do this way. The only thing I would further ask, Jeff, is when you do report that to F&A, report it as a separate section, so it's
Right.
clearly
Yes.
outlined. That'd be great. For all, as Tom says,
All
Right.
the third parties.
Yes.
third parties.
Almost the same way that we report on the Highway 99 relationship
Right,
with
yeah.
Caltrain.
Right. Okay. Well, so I'm going to ask that, we have two separate resolutions in front of us, and I'm going to ask for separate votes on each one. The first one is, and I'm going to assume that the moving parties moved each of them. So
Yes.
moved by Ms. Pasquette, seconded by Mr. Rossi for Resolution 16-21, which is the adoption of the CEQA findings of fact and statement of overriding considerations in connection with funding of the Peninsula Corridor Joint Power Board Peninsula Corridor Electrification Project, and, as part of this first resolution, approval to execute the Peninsula Corridor Joint Powers Board funding agreement, execute a 7-party supplement to the 2012 Caltrain MOU, and a contract with the Peninsula Caltrain Joint Powers Board for the authority's supplemental funding for electrification. And that's all contained in Resolution 16-21. So would the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Schenck,
Yes.
Vice Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Rossi,
Yes.
Director Correa,
Yes.
Director Curtin,
Yes.
Director Pasquette,
Yes.
Chair Richard.
Yes. Okay, now, also moved by Director Pasquette, seconded by Director Rossi, is Resolution 16-22, which is the approval to enter into a funding memorandum of understanding with the City of San Mateo for the San Mateo Grade Separation Project on the Caltrain and High Speed Rail Authority Blended System Corridor. Will the Secretary please call the roll?
Director Schenck,
Yes.
Vice Chair Richards,
Yes.
Director Rossi,
Yes.
Director Correa,
Yes.
Director Curtin,
Yes.
Director Pasquette,
Yes.
Chair Richard.
Yes. Okay, with that, thank you, Mr. Proposis.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Ben.
Mr. Hartnett, Mr. Miller, all the people who worked on this, Mr. Morales and staff, Mr. Felenz, Mr. Andrew. We had a lot of folks working on this, and this is a very important step forward for the program, so thank you.
And all the cooperation and hard work with Mr. Hartnett's organizations. Thanks, Jim.